Hello and welcome to the Big Problems Little Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Barry Scott, and I'm a copywriter, marketer and environmentalist. I love the outdoors, grew up watching David Attenborough and wanted to be like Jane Goodall when I was older. There's still time, but right now I'm fortunate enough to work with lots of very smart people who are trying to make the world a better place in lots of different ways. The goal of this podcast is to shine a light on all of the little solutions out there to a lot of the big problems we're facing. Originally from the UK, Jon and his brother developed the award-winning wheelchair company Nomad, and after selling the business, Jon moved to Australia where he and his family have been living for the last 11 years. Since then, he's worked in a variety of sustainability-focused organisations, including Biopack, ZeroCo and now Cool Planet, where he's engaged in growing the successful sustainability consultancy. Along the way, he's also worked at Krispy Kreme, the BBC and Channel 4, and launched a tech business focused on helping school kids develop a connection to nature. Overall, a fairly wide and varied background, which I always find very interesting. So, welcome to the podcast, Jon.
Thank you very much, Barry. Happy to be here.
Yeah, good. How can I hear wind in the background there? Is there a window open? There's a bit of a breeze going on, is there?
I'm actually sitting outside in Byron Bay. It's pretty warm at the moment, but the wind
lovely.
heralds some change. I think we're due storms later.
Ah, right, okay, yes. Well, we've had the same here as well. We're quite a bit further south than you, but it's been warm and then raining and warm and then raining, but you know, it's quite nice. I've got my umbrella over in the corner there for walking back up to the house. Great. Well, listen, thank you for being here today. And look, as I said earlier, I like a wide and varied career, probably because I've had a few different hats myself over the years, and especially, you know, one that you've started a few businesses of your own. So can I ask, I guess, how did you end up over here in Australia to begin with, and then how did you find yourself in the sustainability space?
So we being my wife and I, travelled for a honeymoon. We sold our house, gave our jobs up in Cardiff and travelled for 12 months, which was the most amazing kind of way to spend the first year of marriage.
Sounds great.
It was the best. And the two places we fell in love with are both quite similar. One was Vancouver, one was Sydney. Both really similar in lots of water, very clean, very friendly sort of thing. A number of uni mates who were living here as well. So the idea after we travelled was always to come straight back. But life got in the way, you know, started a business, we had kids, and it took us 10 years to get back, actually.
Yes. I like Vancouver as well, actually. I was over there a long time ago on a rugby tour, actually. But the city itself, I just remember, because I didn't know much about it before I got there, but I remember you had this, and it was summer when I was there, so they had this lovely sort of bay, and I was playing beach volleyball with these guys, but the mountains were right there as well, so you've got skiing in winter and the beach in summer, so not so much that up in Byron, but yeah, Vancouver's lovely.
No, it's quite similar. Like I say, the coastline around that part of the world's stunning as well. There's really good surfing on Vancouver Island, so we did a bit of that, and you know, so it's we kind of knew we wanted that vibe. Like we come from rural West Wales originally, so both of those places kind of offered that as a bonus, I suppose. Yeah,
and so you came to Australia and you eventually ended up in the sustainability space. Perhaps not originally, but what is it that drew you into that sort of realm? What brought you to that kind of work?
So I suppose it was starting a business with my brother. So before we travelled, I was a management accountant at the BBC, and I was studying and working full time. And it was in the news department. It was very interesting, you know, quite dynamic, creative environment. But I was an accountant, and I never felt like I really was an accountant. So I felt like I was faking it all the time. So as soon as they put voluntary round of redundancies up, I put my hand up and off we went. And then after traveling, you know, like I said, my brother had this awful accident while we were away.
Right.
Lost the use of both of his legs and one arm. And so, you know, I felt like I needed to go back and help, sort that situation out. So we started a
Yeah.
business actually. And the business was, as much as anything, sort of, picking him up and building this kind of phoenix out of the ashes story for a guy who'd, essentially lost everything that he found normal and comforting. So
Yeah.
we started a wheelchair manufacturing business, and it went really well and commercially really exciting project and things like that. But more than anything, the thing I really took out of it was a sense of sort of purpose and just being able to do something that made me feel good. And I got hungry for that. And
Yeah.
apart from a 2-year blip in Sydney, I've been in that sort of space ever since.
Yeah. Being able to align what you do with something that actually helps somebody or makes a difference is always a really good thing. I've always, well, throughout the many jobs I've done over the years, my wife is she's a radiographer, so she's always in that position where literally every single day she really does help somebody, which I think is a wonderful thing. And if you can align what you do with what helps people, then that's a nice place to be.
I don't take that for granted, I know it's a privilege. And I think it's becoming more and more, number one, more and more important and necessary, but also more
Yeah.
and more common, especially sort of millennials and younger generations. They want that purpose. They want that connection to work with their value system and stuff like that. So I don't think I
Yeah.
could ever do anything that didn't really mean something to me again.
Yes. Yeah. And what about the accounting side of things? Does that still sort of feature in what you do or not?
Massively, and to be
Yeah.
honest, that was part of the pitch for this from the CFO to get me to do it in the first place. Oh, look, it's a huge amount of transferable skills, and every company needs numerically literate people and people that can read balance sheets, and certainly through the startup and even now, I use those skills every single day. So it definitely
Yes.
wasn't time wasted, and yeah, I think it's made me a more rounded person professionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so tell me, you did that startup with your brother in the UK and then one over here as well, which I know a little bit about, but can you tell me, Genus, I think it was called, was that right? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So again, I'd already spent 5 years at a company called Biopack by then, and that was about sustainability and circular economy.
Yeah.
And, I felt like my growth, trajectory there had sort of come to an end. I'd been head of sales for 5 years, and I was kind of getting itchy feet on the entrepreneurial side again. I kind of wanted to create,
Yeah.
and, friend of mine pitches ideas to me all the time, and one of them really kind of resonated. And it was all about really kind of gamifying sustainability for kids. And what we ended up doing was building an online app, where you could literally get, help kids to affect real world change. So you'd give them tasks and missions and things that actually had real world value, like helping them to recycle or helping their school get, more energy efficient, that sort of thing. And then the bigger the impact those missions had, the more points they'd get, and then they could upgrade their avatars and things like that. So it was really, it was an early experiment in sort of gamification of sustainability. So really, really exciting project and real passion point for me. I got 2 young kids. I was talking to their school and hundreds of other schools.
Yeah.
Really, we got so close. We did nearly everything right. And,
Yeah.
we had some very good trials with some meaningful brands and, got into something like 40 schools and things like that. We
Yeah.
just couldn't monetize it quickly enough, and
Yeah.
with startups, your burn rate is critical, right? And we raised fairly well a couple of times, but we didn't feel like we were quite close enough to commercialization to go back out to market and ask for more money. So yeah, unfortunately we had to call it quits. Yeah, another.
And it's, so I was
Yeah.
just going to say you did everything right, you say, but sometimes even that doesn't work. You just need that little bit of luck sometimes as well, just to get you there.
Just to help you
But,
along, yeah. And look,
yeah.
there's definitely that, but I can definitely pinpoint 1 or 2 sort of strategic things that maybe we shouldn't have done. For
Right.
example, we were trying to build a game for the kids, but then we knew that as a go-to-market strategy, we kind of had to get into schools just as a scaled
Yes.
outreach opportunity. And then, of course, the schools wanted to be an educational platform. So we ended up developing a learning management system, and the whole thing kind of grew before we'd nailed that one, customer profile. So yeah, that was a
Yeah.
big one for us.
Yeah. It just all became a wee bit more complicated than it needed to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, absolutely. You should just focus on that one customer profile, nail that proposition, and then grow.
And so when that finished, you've moved on now to, is that what you're doing now? So you're now working for a company called Cool Planet
That's right.
up in Byron Bay.
Yep. So, at around the time that we drew the Genus experiment to a close, Helen and I had already been talking about, moving out of Sydney. The kids were at a very kind of fun but sensitive age, and we just wanted them to have the kind of childhood that we had in Wales, just be kids for as long as possible. And we'd done a lot of traveling up and down the East Coast, and we knew that, the Northern Rivers was quite a special place.
Yeah.
So we used that as the sort of catalyst. I was in between work. My eldest was about to start high school. So that was kind of like why we decided to go then. So I came up here on a short-term contract with another really cool sustainability startup called ZeroCo. And after that came to an end, I found Cool Planet and they found me, and the rest is history.
Great. And so look, I know one of the things that you're doing at the moment is to do with helping organizations, I guess, adjust to this mandatory reporting that's just sort of recently come in. So you have to be a certain size. If you are a certain size, then you have to do all of these different things. So, and we're kind of sort of now, I guess, getting around to the whole idea of the podcast. I'm trying to focus on little things that help solve our big problems out there. And I think no matter how much we do individually and personally, no matter how much you recycle, your bins and you do all of these things, the government has got to step in and do its part as well. And I think, these sort of this mandatory reporting is one way that they're starting to, make things happen. So can you just tell us a little bit about that and what organizations, what size you have to be, what do you have to do, and can you see this actually making a real difference throughout all of their supply chains? Sorry, that's quite a big question. You can start at the beginning. That's a lot of questions there. But anyway, just tell us a wee bit about that, please.
I'll work through that. Firstly, I'll echo the sentiment that you started that with, and it is important for individuals to take responsibility for their choices and their lives and things, and that absolutely moves the needle on a bigger scale. But the real change and the real impact is generated when it's a systemic change, and I think it's so important that the government has started this mandatory climate reporting, because it pushes the onus back onto the companies in the country who are the biggest emitters. They are the biggest generators of waste, and they massive users of resources and things like that. So critically important to have that top-down change as well as the grassroots bottom-up shift. In terms of what it's doing, it's requiring the biggest companies in the country to report on the financial impacts of their climate-based risks and opportunities. That sounds quite technical, and in reality, the reporting of it is technical. But essentially what it's doing is it's saying, Company X, tell us how you're going to account for climate change. What are you doing to affect climate change in terms of, your supply chain, your resources, your energy, your waste, that sort of thing? And how also is climate change looking like it could affect you guys? So and the reason for that is that will then influence things like investment decisions. It'll influence things like financing decisions. It influences a lot of financial decisions, basically, about the well-being and the future resilience of the business. And they have to report on that as part of their annual reporting regimen now, which is amazing.
So is it just for ASX listed companies? So is it just for ASX listed companies, or is there? How do they determine the size?
They determine it based on three criteria. The first one is kind of revenue. The second one is headcount, how many employees you've got. And the third one is what your total asset value is. So the biggest tier, what they call Group 1, is essentially it's over $500 million in revenue, and it's over 250 people as a headcount. And then they have a certain threshold for their asset base as well. Tier 2 is smaller, coming in at like 100 million revenue. And then you work your way down. Tier 3 is 50 50 million revenue. But the important thing is, while that roadmap's established, Group 1 is already in their reporting period. Group 2 start in July and Group 3 in 2027. But the immediate implication, and this is where the system really starts to work, is that everybody that is a supplier to those companies now has to think about their impact and report on their greenhouse gas emissions and things like that. Because in order for a Group 1 company to report on what they call Scope 3, which is a big part of that is their supply chain, they have to go back through their supply chain and get the data from the ground. So we talk to a lot of Group 2 companies, Group 3s, but we're also saying to the SME sector, which is a massive proportion of the Australian economy.
They're providing to these other larger organizations. Yeah.
And if they're supplying to them, and if you're not able to provide that information, you stand to lose out on future business. You may not win that tender. You may not retain that business. But if you can, get ahead of the game and lead that sort of, that movement, then you'll win new business. You'll get those tenders. So there's genuine commercial opportunity in doing the right thing in terms of sustainability. And that, for me, is a really, really exciting place for us to be, because, all of a sudden, the whole economy has to start thinking the way that we want them to. Yes. So it looks like it's going to be a very, very interesting few years for us.
And when you start to, so presumably what you guys do, so there'll be some companies out there who are like, oh, we've got to look into this stuff now. We don't even know what Scope 1, 2, and 3 is. How do we start? So they would come to you and you would say, okay, well, let's figure out where you are now. And then here's areas where you can improve and here's how to do it. Do you find that many of these companies who are coming to you, or many you chat to, have just no idea about any of this kind of stuff? Or do they have a bit of an idea but just haven't really put much of it into action as yet?
We've seen every scenario you can imagine on that on that spectrum. So
it's a sliding scale, is it?
It really is.
Yeah.
So, we've spoken to Group 2 companies who, have a sustainability team and basically don't know what's going on, what the new legislation means and how they can get ready.
And is the sustainability team just one guy in the corner there? Just
again, sometimes, sometimes, and then you go right the way through
nobody listens
to. Basically, sometimes, right the way through to companies that are fully formed, ready to go, have everything in place. They just need almost third-party verification. And while it might be a lot harder to work with the companies, that are starting from scratch, it's actually more fun because you can see the progress, you can see the impact that you're having, and with the additional challenges comes a bit more kind of reward as well. So it's we kind of like to help companies that are starting their journey, because there's no assumptions made, there's no bad habits. We can help them design the systems that are, that have got that scalable kind of end point in mind. So you get a better result sometimes when they don't know anything at the start.
And often a lot of the things that you can put into place are actually going to save them money anyway. There might be a bit of an expense to begin with, perhaps, depends what it is, obviously, but if you're suddenly saving somebody money, surely that's a place that they're all happy to get to.
So that's always been a big focus for Cool Planet. We have this kind of mantra that we commercialize sustainability. So if you go back 15, 20 years, profit was seen as a bit of a dirty word, it was profit at the expense of the planet. And now it's absolutely understood that you can have a planet positive business. You can do well by doing good. And as you pointed out, a sustainable practice, a sustainable supply chain is an efficient one, which means it's cost effective. So you can absolutely save money there. We've already talked about the fact that we help companies win tenders and grow market share by being leaders in sustainability and being able to talk to their suppliers properly. So there is so many commercial reasons for jumping into ESG at the moment. So it's about improving margins, it's about growing the sales, it's about reducing your cost base, and it's absolutely about reducing the impact on the planet in appropriate ways. So relevant to your sector, appropriate to your size and your budgets and things like that. There's no one size fits all. There's good practice, and then you just apply that to the specifics of, one company or the other.
Yeah. So how would, for example, let's say it's a sort of mostly online, digital-based company. They're not providing any physical product. They're not manufacturing anything. It's a service. It's an online service, whatever, I mean, it could even be this service that we're using right now to record this podcast. How would they start to have a look at their emissions, and how would a company like that start to, is it just down to the energy that they use, or are there other things that sort of start to come into it then?
Yeah,
just as an
typically,
example.
in terms of emissions, which is, what you're asking about, we typically start with scopes 1 and 2. So scope 1 is basically, it's quite specific. It's designed more for heavy industry and manufacturing. It's based on fuels, the emissions from fuels burnt in company-owned assets. So, if you have a boiler or you're burning fuel to heat up metals, that sort of thing, that's scope 1. Generally pretty easy because they have very good records, or usually have good records of what that means. Scope 2 is maybe even easier because that's literally just purchased electricity. So, an electronic, digital, or service-based business like the one you've described would absolutely have, their bills. That's a very simple one. And while that particular model that you described probably wouldn't have a long and complex supply chain, you look at every other driver of emission in scope 3. But what we do is
would that go to
beyond...
the extent as to how their employees drive to work? I mean, does it go
absolutely.
to that far? Yeah. Whether they get a bus or not, or whatever, e-scooters, whatever,
Employees commuting sits within scope 3. But what I was going to say is, what we do is, we think about impact as a broader than just environmental impact, and certainly broader than emissions. So we look at ESG, which is environment, but it's also social and governance. So it's how the governance part is how the business runs itself, how it takes accountability, how it manages its own processes and policies and things like that. The social thing's very, very important. So service-based industry absolutely can have a big social impact, whether it's, they do pro bono work, or, they have a particular cause that they support or something like that. How they employ, what their engagement is with their employees and things like that. Very, very relevant in the S for ESG. And we apply, it's kind of like our IP that we apply these. So there's a term called quadruple bottom accounting. So it's not just looking at profit and loss.
Did you develop that yourself? Did you?
Quadruple bottom line accounting is nothing to do with us, but the 4 P's, the 4 P's is us. So the 4 P's are people, planet, purpose, and profit. So if you look at those 4 P's, and you go deep into each one of those, you will come out having a very, very good understanding of where your business sits within not just the environment, but like within society, within its place in the market, how it's performing, where it's heading, and what that looks like going forward. So, it's a holistic look at the company.
So how long? So this has just come in for tier 1 companies. It's about to come in for tier 2 in July, did you say? And then tier 3 in a couple of years. How long do you think before we'll start to see some real differences, real change filtering through to all these other companies who supply these larger ones? How quickly do you think we'll start to see that happen?
It's already happening. There are suppliers to these big companies that are having to now supply, environmental data to them. And, and it's not even just environmental, it's evidence of their responsible business practices, modern slavery documentation, ethical supply chain, ethical procurement policies, that sort of thing. So again, if these companies don't have them, they know they need to get them. So the smarter companies and the ones that are going to get the biggest bang for buck are the ones that go early. Doing it when you have to and doing it when everyone else already is doing it, it's kind of like you don't get much kudos for that. So going early, definitely better.
And do you see, or have you seen, let's say you are a factory or whatever, it's so much cheaper and more manageable now to just cover the roof and solar panels, buy a couple of big batteries, and suddenly, I mean, the math kind of works now to make that so much more affordable than it was some time ago. And, once you've got that in place, you can get people much more easily buying electric cars to come to work, to charge while they're there, and all of that sort of flow-on thing as well. Is that something that you're starting to see a bit more now, or?
Oh, for sure. And again, you got to give credit to the government where it's due. There's things like, we do a lot of grant work for state
Which is not
governments.
Something you get to say very often, I must admit. Got to give
Absolutely.
the government
and listen,
it's nice to be able to say that.
And don't get me wrong, there's a lot they could be doing better, but we do a lot of grant work for state government. There's something that we've just done. The government is giving out literally like $40,000 grants to companies, provided they have an electricity bill of a certain value, to go and plan for net zero. So they're literally giving them money to build commercial plans to get them to reduce their emissions over the long term.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. So we've done a couple of those for clients, and all of a sudden they then understand what they need to do over the next 3, 4, 5 years to get to a position of net zero,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's incredibly important that businesses start planning about that.
Great. Well, listen, John, I know that your brother just arrived the other day, and I reckon you guys probably want to get out there and get heading off to the beach. So thank you very much for your time today. Is there anything else that you think that we could sort of finish off on? Any other little solutions to big problems out there that you guys are aware of? Or is there something, just simple little things that companies could do right now to start, lowering their emissions somehow? An easy, low-hanging fruit?
Look, I think it's very easy for people like me to pretend that they can come up with very quick, simple answers. True sustainability, is strategic, and it's hard, and it takes time.
All right, so there's no quick fixes, unfortunately.
Not really, not in a
Okay.
meaningful sense. I think it's more important to understand where you want to get to and where you're starting from. Only then can you really start to apply appropriate strategies. But everybody knows what you got to do these days. Don't throw much in the red bin. Recycle as much as you can. Turn the lights off. All of the basics. That's been around for ages. The specifics of systemic change, you can't. I can't sell that to anybody.
No, that's fair enough. You can't change an entire system just with flicking a switch. Unfortunately, it takes a while.
It would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Okay, well, listen, thank you very much, John. All the best, and
Really,
hope you get on well.
Really good to talk to you. Thanks a lot, Barry.
Okay, cheerio. Bye.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to share these little solutions far and wide.